Pro Style Production Network presents The Inside Look.
It's the Inside Look podcast presented by Planet Pizza and Birdie's Hydromulching. On today's show, we've got the Nodak Speedway president, Mr. Brandon Beeter. He wears more hats than just that. First of all, Brandon, thanks for some time here today. How are things after opening night last night?
I'm pretty tired. Wore out, back at work. The grind of Monday through Friday job is real on a Monday morning.
You wear so many different hats in order to make Nodak Speedway what it is. Let's start with this. Talk about yesterday being the first race day on the schedule. Due to COVID-19, it's about a month later than planned on. How much work has there been in preparation gearing up for the event last night on the COVID-19 side of things?
Well, what you run into on a year like this is sponsorship dollars are hard to come by. Nick, you and I have talked several times in the past month or so. Sponsorship dollars are hard to come by. I've had to ask all my volunteers that have got paid in the past to take a pay cut, if not completely go without pay. My ticket takers, we used to get Bishop Ryan in there to take tickets. I've had to cut that expense out of the race program. I've had to bring in new ticket takers and all volunteer staff, completely working with a new group of people in every aspect underneath the grandstand, and then submitting a plan and working with the North Dakota State Fair management team. Renee and Craig have been absolutely amazing to work with to get all our ducks in a row with Jeff Singer and M&S Concessions to make sure they had everything lined up on their end. It's been about 3 weeks of planning, work, preparation, and last night did not go without its hiccups. We had some people that weren't able to make it in some various roles. For those of you that weren't there last night, when you came through the ticket booth, you might have seen me, or if you were there, you seen me taking your ticket at the ticket booth coming in, and then not more than 15 minutes later, you seen me up in the flag stand flagging the races. That's what it takes on a race night to make it happen. I have so many people, not only me that wear several hats, it's my wife, it's several other volunteers down there that they jump in a water truck and the next minute they're working a back gate or they're running security. It's a group effort down there, and there's a core 20 people that absolutely do what it takes on a given night to make them races go.
Well, you certainly deserve a round of applause for the effort. I mean, not often do you see the president of the race club at the door taking tickets. And then not often do you see the president of the race club working his way up to the front straightaway, climbing that ladder and being one of the main pieces to the puzzle as the head flag man on race night. It's just unbelievable. With that being said, why do you do this? I know that you have a real job, and a 9 to 5 is an understatement for you working out in the oil field. That job requires many more hours than 40. This Nodak Speedway job requires many more hours than just 40 in a week to do it right. Why do you do it? Where does the passion come from? And are you staying sane during all this would be my question.
The passion comes from my love for dirt track racing. I grew up as a little kid going to the races and watching my idols race. Dave Lackada, Jordan Boyce, John Carell. The list goes on. Dick Schultz. I could go on forever. Jay Tooley. And I think back to my younger years, and I just dreamt of doing what they do. And for several years, from the time I was 14 years old, my dad got me my first race car. My blinders were on, and all I worried about was racing, putting a car on the track. And for 15 years or 16 years of my racing life, I didn't care what happened behind the scenes at the racetrack to make the races go. And, in 2015 or 14 and 15, I took a long look at what happens behind the scenes at a racetrack, and I thought, man, I really want to do my part. I seen a need for some help in the racing community, in the racing world, and I just thought, with my brother and my experience of traveling all over this beautiful country and visiting hundreds of racetracks in my racing career, and taking all the knowledge that we learned on how racetracks are ran and the the way they do things compared to the way things are done up here in North Dakota. I just thought I could take that knowledge and give it to the people here at the Nodak Speedway and other racetracks in our region. And that's where the decision was made in 2015 to basically, I don't want to say hang up the helmet. I have not retired. I have not retired from racing, and I don't want the word retirement from driving a race car to even be thrown around with my name, because there will be racing in Brandon Beeter's future. Do not think that I will not climb in a race car again, because I believe that I will. But for right now, I believe the need of somebody running the races, racetrack, is there for a guy like me and what I can bring. And I want the future for my son, for your kids, Nick, for everybody's kids in 15 to 20 years. I want racing to be there for them. And if it takes me sacrificing, 10 years of my racing career to do it, that's what I'm going to do. And then I can revisit racing at that time, with me. And my son, Max, is 12 years old. I figure I have a year or two, and then he'll be sitting in a race car wheeling that machine and hopefully visiting me in Victory Lane, and I get to interview.
An ambassador for the sport is an understatement for you. With your passion for it, with your love for it, on top of what your duties are at Nodak Speedway, you also own and operate a company called Darn TV. And Darn TV is an outlet. It's a lot like PSP Network, but Darn TV is a monster in the dirt track industry, or the dirt track world across the region here. Touch on Darn TV a little bit and your view on the webcast and delivering an opportunity to watch these races to people that can't make it to given shows due to whatever reasons may be. But Darn TV has certainly been good. Touch on that just a little bit.
Man, Darn TV, I think, was created outside of turn 4 between you and I, just kind of talking back and forth. There was a need for some broadcasting in North Dakota. It was something that I got approached to by Barry Braun and some other people that, hey, North Dakota has something to offer for the rest of the world. The people in Iowa and everywhere else want to see North Dakota racing. It's some of the best drivers in the nation. It's the best racetracks in the nation. We can put it on a national level and showcase it, and we dreamt up Darn TV. And I honestly didn't plan to be as hands-on with Darn TV as I have been, but because it grew so fast, so quickly, and all the tracks have embraced it, Williston, all the Western tracks, Estevan, Williston, Dickinson, Mandan, Nodak Speedway, it's grown into I have to be hands-on. I'm running the camera, and then I throw the headset on, and it's actually allowed me to become an announcer myself. I call a race or two every now and then with, on the broadcast, or even jump on with Larry McFall or whoever's announcing. Sometimes up in Estevan, I announce the whole show, or down in Dickinson. But the biggest thing that Darn TV has done for me or for the sport, it puts our racetracks, our drivers, and what we have to offer up here in North Dakota on the map for the rest of the nation to see. I don't want to give away all the numbers, but I mean, there was over 100 people tuned into Darn TV last night, watching from all over this great nation, from Texas to California to New York to Pennsylvania. It's just unbelievable, the support and the people that tune into Darn TV to watch a weekly show at the Nodak Speedway, because they like to see what we have to offer up here in North Dakota, and they wouldn't get to see that otherwise. And that's what I want to bring. And I'm a partner with the racetrack. Darn TV has partnered up with all these racetracks, so now the racetracks are getting a cut off the broadcast. I'm sharing the revenue, and it has become a true partnership, and hopefully it continues to grow. And that also, it goes back to that ambassador of the sport, or whatever you call it. By me being at the racetrack, running the camera, these racetracks, I've opened up the opportunity, the wealth of information that I have inside my brain of being at all these racetracks and being an announcer and being around. I can share that knowledge with them, and I can assist them if they want me to assist them. If they ask for any sort of, help or anything on race night, I can do anything that they want me to do on race night. I don't have a problem helping them out in any way, shape, or form. When I show up to the Devil's Lake Speedway, I ask Nolan, what do you need help with? And I help them. That's what Darn TV offers. We're more than just pay-per-view. We're an assistant to the racetrack on race night.
It really is amazing, your generosity, just the way that you're wired. We had the Minot High graduation on the PSP network about a week or so ago, and you showed up as a representative of Nodak Speedway. You showed up as a representative of Darn TV, and you showed up as just a good guy being there to help anyone that was around. Where does that come from, Brandon? I mean, your family obviously had quite an impact on the way you operate throughout life, hey?
I think it comes from my mom. I really do. We lost my mom in 2012, but I think back to the way my mom was, and she helped everybody. She did daycare for a living for 30 years. That's what she did. And she was just the type of person that she wanted to help everybody, and she was assisting everybody. And I think that's where I get it from. And if you're down there, if you're down at the racetrack, and I guess all I wanted to do is, I have a knowledge of how the internet is at the racetrack. I have a knowledge of how the grandstand is set up. I'm just there to lend a hand. I don't want to be in the way. I'm just there to lend a hand. And if you need anything, I can run and get it, or I can do this. I've been in your position, Nick. I've been put on the spot to do a broadcast, and I've been by myself, and I know what it's like to be on that island. So I just wanted to give somebody like you a companion on the island and say, hey man, I'm here for you. I guess that's the way I look at it. And I know there's a lot of people out there in the world that don't look at it the same way as me, and we live in society right now as a me first world, and I try to live life in a way, if I can put a smile on somebody's face, or if I can help somebody out in a given day and make somebody's day better, I feel like I've accomplished something. So
with that being said, that word ambassador for racing, I like, because it describes you perfectly. You're a great ambassador for the sport. What is the state of dirt track racing in the Midwest, in Minot, North Dakota? What's the state of Nodak Speedway? Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the landscape and the temperature of this a little bit, but leading up to this year and even through last night, what would you say that the outlook for racing is in the future? Will it continue for 15 years like you mentioned? Is it on a downswing, upswing? Where do you see it going?
Before last night, I was hoping to tell you that we were going to be rock steady. The car count last night scared me. I don't know where we're at. Sponsorship wise, we're definitely down. We're down to upwards of probably 60% of where we were in years past.
Oofta.
I think that's a product of the economy that we're in. We haven't really got out and sold, just for the simple fact of, how do we go to a business and try to get money out of businesses that have been closed for a month or a month and a half? That's the scary part. But I mean, as a board of directors, we're left to make tough decisions, and we're gonna make the tough decisions that we have to do to keep the racetrack open. But the biggest problem that I see in the future of dirt track racing in this area is I don't see anybody coming in behind me when I decide to walk away, because that day is coming, and it's not because I won't love the sport anymore. I'll love the sport to no end, but I want to spend time with my wife and kids at the racetrack. They're only this age once, and I want to make more memories. And it's one of them deals. My son, I just said he's 12 years old, and he's 2 years away from getting in a race car himself, and I'd prefer not to be president of the Nodak Speedway when he gets in a race car. I'd prefer to be wrenching on his race car in the pit area and watching as a dad from the catwalk, or in that aspect. I don't want to be wearing a headset being flag man and be underneath the grandstand taking tickets. I'd prefer to be a dad at that point in time. And my fear is, is there somebody out there with the passion that I have that's going to lead this Nodak Speedway into the future? Right now, I don't see him. And we rely as a society, when we find somebody like myself that's willing to take on a job and do it, we just kind of step back and let that person do it, rather than coming in and figuring out what they're doing and how are they doing it, and going, okay, I can learn from this guy, and then I can lead it for 4 years, and then we can find somebody else to lead it for the next 4 years. I don't know, but I see a lot of other racetracks around the area doing that too. Byron Fichter, I know that he's in the same boat as me. He's ready to kind of step another direction up there in Estevan, and we don't know who's going to take over for him. And Jake Nelson, thank God for Jake Nelson over there in Williston. I think he's doing an amazing job over in Williston. And I have a great relationship with all these guys running these racetracks. Luke Krogh down in Dickinson. They got good things going, but who's behind them? It's like next man up. You hear that in sports terms all the time. When your star player gets hurt, who's the next man up? And that's the fear right now in dirt track racing. Who's the next man up when we decide that our next phase of life has to kick in? Because it's coming. I mean, I've been doing this now for 6 years. I've devoted 60. This is my 6th year to the Nodak Speedway, and it's almost time for me to move on to my next phase, which would be to be a dad and a husband, really, at that point.
Well, and it's overwhelming when you think about going from the ticket booth to the flag stand, and that just is at 5 o'clock until 6. That doesn't mention anything about showing up at the racetrack. I'd have to assume yesterday morning by 10 o'clock in the morning, 9 in the morning, something like that, and getting that track prepared all day. I mean, it's got to be just hours and hours worth of time. How hard has it been to be on the opposite side of the fence? Because you were a darn good race car driver, too. I mean, a guy nationally known in the hobby stock world as one of the best competitors. What is it like on race nights sitting up there? I know you got that blood in your vein. I know you've got that adrenaline need for speed. What's it like having to be on the opposite side of maybe where you want to be on those race nights when you'd probably want to be inside of a race car maybe?
I don't know. I suppose that I get the same fire in my belly, and I get the same I get the same feeling now when we put on a great show. At the end of the night last night, I felt like I won the feature. I got to interview 5 great people in Victory Lane. We put on 5 great races. There was 2 photo finishes. When I got to the end of the night last night, I looked at the people around me and I said, I can't go to bed. And they go, why? Aren't you tired? And I go, I just spent 14 hours at the racetrack. I got to the racetrack at 8 a.m. and it was 10 o'clock last night when I left the racetrack. And I said, I can't go to bed. Does somebody want to go get a drink? Or I don't drink, but I said, if there's a bar open, do you want to go sit down and bullshit or talk? Or, I can't go to bed. I'm like wired. I'm ecstatic, just like I won the biggest race of my life, because that's how I get my fire right now, is we put on a great show. And I don't even think about sitting in a race car. I mean, if the time comes when I sit in a race car, I'm sure it'll be great. But when I watched them guys on the track from the flag stand last night, I try to watch it as a fan and as an official, but what show am I putting on for the fans, and are they entertained? And that's how I get my enjoyment now, I guess. I don't think about it as a racer anymore, and I don't know how to answer that, I guess, the proper way, but that's how I look at it. Well, that's the only way. If I thought about it as a racer, I probably wouldn't enjoy what I do so much.
Well,
Put it that way.
We sure appreciate what you do, and you've been around it and good at it for such a long time, since you were, like you mentioned, just a kid when you had your first race car way back in the day. Every PSP Inside Look that we do, we always talk about the advice to young athletes. Usually, this is no different. The sport of racing is one that the magnitude of this across the country, people that aren't in this circle, pardon the pun there, they don't understand how deep grassroots this becomes and how many racetracks there are across the country, how many fans of this sport there really are. Give Nodak Speedway a chance sometime. Come on out to North Dakota State Fairgrounds and watch this. You might be hooked in an instant. But we ask the same question to everybody. What words of advice do you have, Brandon, to youngsters out there that want to compete at a high level, maybe at a Nodak Speedway, or get behind the wheel, or even in their own sport? Your words of advice are going to be good because you were a high school athlete in a couple different sports as well as a champion on the dirt as well. What's your advice to youngsters out there on being the best they can be?
Man, I tell you what, I have a passion for coaching young kids too, Nick. I coach my son's basketball team, and I help coach football, and I help a little bit on baseball and stuff. And there's a saying that I use for my kids. Be humble enough to suck until you become good. Because nobody is good right out of the gate. You're never going to be good right out of the gate. You're gonna have trouble. You're gonna struggle, and that's the truth, and that's the reality of life. When you start a sport, when you start into racing, your first year, 2, 3, 4 years, you're not going to win races. You're not going to come out and set the world on fire. But when you reach year 4 or 5, I've always had a philosophy that 5 years is the magic number of when things start to click, and you start to see the fruits of all your labor. And I have proof in the pudding with several racers that I've helped start their racing career, and I have several people that have started their racing career and fizzled out after 2 years because they came in and thought, well, I'm going to win and I'm going to spend a bunch of money, and then in 2 years they're gone because they didn't win, and they spent a bunch of money for nothing because they thought money wins races, and really that's not the truth. Hard work wins races. Hard work in the shop wins races, and hard work, research, money helps, but really when it comes down to it, be humble enough to suck until you're good enough to win.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Style Production Network. Visit www.psp.network. Follow us on Facebook at The PSP Network, and follow us on Twitter at Network PSP. PSP Network. It's game day.